Today, on episode 28 of the Fit Stoic podcast, remember, this won't last. This thing we call life has an expiry date. And this has implications in the choices that we make in every area of our lives. Yet, how many of us consider this as we choose a snack or choose a movie to watch? So, let's sit within this perspective of our own mortality as we explore these ideas. All right, welcome to the show. I'm Corey Samuelson. So as heavy as this topic is, our own mortality, we don't need to think about it in such heavy terms. Even though this is called, remember, this won't last, this can refer to anything that we experience in life. So not only our own lifetime, which is the longest thing that we're ever going to experience, but right down to sitting in traffic, watching a video. Everything has a beginning and an end. And we're going to look at some of these ideas today. So today I'll be reading chapter 21 of the Gymchiridion, and the title is, This Won't Last. Begin quote. Memento mori. This won't last. Today is the day to improve the quality of your life. One day you'll have run out of chances. Don't wait for tomorrow. Do what you can to be excellent today. End quote. As I mentioned just before I read the chapter, there's a beginning and an end to everything that we experience. That we are mortal, that we're born and then we die. That puts a perspective on everything that we experience. Maybe how we experience a conversation with a friend, or just sitting quietly, looking out the window, just, taking a few moments to relax and unplug. Something begins and then it ends. That gives the real value to the moments that we are living, that we are choosing. Knowing that life is limited, that we are going to die, puts a perspective on the choices that we make. A habit that many people struggle with is procrastination. I know I do. Putting things off just a little bit further into the future again, thinking, I'll have time tomorrow, I'll have time next week. I'll be able to take care of that next month. Oh, next summer for sure. That kind of mentality, that thinking, as if the future is guaranteed, as if I will be able to do that. And not only to think from that perspective, that misguided thinking, that I'll even be alive then. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, I probably will be. I'm fairly young and healthy at this point. I'm assuming that I'm still going to be in the same situation. It's not just my mortality that's the potential here to not be there, but what about my health at the moment? It's good, but that may not be there next week, next month, next summer. So these ideas that I have of an almost, I know it's not an unlimited future, but I do consider my future to be fairly open. And I make these assumptions, and I assume that things are going to get better, or at least stay the same, and allow me to be in a position to do things in the future. But that is not guaranteed. This won't last. There will be changes. Now, if I make choices that advance my health, then I may be in a better position. If I increase my prosperity, then again, I may have more options in the future. But what I absolutely know is what I am experiencing right now. The options that I have in this moment, those are, I could almost think of them as guaranteed because I'm in it right now. Whereas things may completely change in a week. And I think as a society, as a world, as the entire globe has experienced in the past 6 months, starting back in late March, early April, things changed. Our entire, what didn't change? Everything changed. Personally, I could not wrap my head around what was happening, even as it happened. So forget that I would have been able to predict or imagine that something like the current pandemic was going to happen, even as I was living with what was going on. It still seemed unreal. And having lived through it, and I'm living through it right now, as are we all, I know for sure that I would never have imagined such a scenario. That was nowhere on my radar, that the entire world would just change almost overnight. So for me to assume that my own life, my own circumstances will just keep merrily going along, and that I'll be as healthy, I'll be as aware, that I'll have my faculties about me. Me assuming that everything is just going to be as it is, or even better, that is taking a lot for granted. And that is the point of memento mori, that this won't last, that death is just sitting over our shoulder at all times, and not just our own mortality. So you don't have to go completely morbid if that is too much to ask at the moment, but the death of a circumstance, for example, that health that we enjoy right now may take a turn for the worse, that a relationship that we have may end and not of our own choosing, that a job that we enjoy may be completely eliminated because of a pandemic. These are also the things that have a beginning and then have an end. And sometimes, I would say most of the time, we have no idea about when things can change. And just in an instant, we can't predict the future. We can definitely have a guess, but sometimes things will come up right out of left field. The lesson of this episode, of this chapter, is that this won't last. And that goes for the bad times as well, obviously. This idea that our circumstances won't last goes for the ones we prefer and the ones that we would not prefer as well. So I've been talking a little bit more about, hey, think about the good times that you're enjoying right now, that you assume are going to continue well into the future. Maybe don't take that for granted and don't assume that that's going to go on. So the job you have, the health you're enjoying, that kind of thing. However, it also goes for the scenarios and the circumstances and the experiences that we don't prefer. So if times are hard right now, if we're having challenge, these won't last either. Things always change. And the one thing that we can guarantee is that as a whole, our experience of life will end sometime. And I don't want to get too morbid with this. That's obviously something the Stoics were very much into. They were constantly harping on the idea of, remember, death is sitting at our shoulder. If that's too much to sit and ponder at the moment, just use it again, just as Epictetus said, with things that can break or that we can lose. Don't start with something like losing a family member. Start with a cup, something easy. So same thing here. Just remember, this won't last. And you can apply that to a sore neck, for example, or a pinching shoe. It won't last. And just start with these small things. And as you get better at it, then you can start working your way up to the big things, right? So realizing that things end. When we look at life from that perspective, it makes us able to really make important choices. We can put our values and the things that we would prefer to experience in a hierarchy. So we can put our top values and then just start slotting in all the other ones until we get to the bottom values. Now, the bottom values still have value. We still prefer them. But if we had to pick one value over another, we know, well, this one is below this one. This one is, 3, 4 below this one up here. And this is my top value. And I'm not going to suggest anything, because a person's excellence and the life that they want to live is up to themselves. And just because somebody else values something very highly, that doesn't make it a universal value. The virtues that the Stoics talk about, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance or self-control, these are values in action. And they consider that if you live with virtue, then it doesn't matter when the end comes. We will have lived an excellent life. The idea of eudaimonia, a smoothly flowing life. This was the Stoics' idea, to live with virtue, to be an excellent human being, so that at any moment, the end of something, not necessarily just life, but of something, anything, the existence of the cup, it slipped out of my hands, and now that cup, that possession that I had, is done. By living with virtue, by being an excellent human being, the end of things isn't something that we would consider bad. And therefore, our life, our experience of life, would be smooth, and it would be happy right to the very end. I was going to say right to the bitter end, but obviously if you're happy, the end is not bitter. It is just the end. Now, I did have a quote from Marcus Aurelius that I was going to read, and I'll just get right to that. Begin quote. Not just that every day more of our life is used up and less of it is left, but this too. If we live longer, can we be sure our mind will still be up to understanding the world? So we need to hurry, not just because we move daily closer to death, but also because our understanding, our grasp of the world, may be gone before we get there. End quote. This is the Gregory Hayes translation, and it was Meditations, Book 3, the very first chapter, or stanza. I'm not sure what they're called. Here Marcus Aurelius is talking not necessarily the end of life itself, but the end of our ability to think clearly because of our declining mental health. So he says, hurry. He uses that word, or it's translated as that. Make haste is probably a word that another translator may have used. But the idea that he's getting across is this won't last. The health of the brain that you're enjoying right now, your ability to make clear distinctions of what is good, what is bad, again from that Stoic perspective, our character, not the results. That ability to make those distinctions may also end. And so, get to work, do things, make choices, be as excellent a human being as you can possibly be. And do it now. Hurry. Don't wait for tomorrow. Do it. This haste, this hurry, doesn't need to be panicked. It's not a mad scramble. It is simply knowing the values that you hold, the hierarchy of those values, what you consider to be excellent. And then when you have moments of choice, to be consistent with the highest values that you hold, because that is where you will experience the most excellent life that you can. And if you're doing really well, that is where you will help others experience their most excellent life. And if you're doing really, really well, you'll impact more and more people with your own excellence. Those are the types of choices that you can make when you realize there is a hard finish line here. This too will end. Thank you once again for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to these episodes. And if you like what you heard, please do share it with someone that you believe might like it too. This is Corey. Whatever your circumstance, operate with excellence.